Welcome to Midnight Confessions. You found us. Real people. Real stories. The kind that make you check your locks twice. These aren't fake ghost stories. They're confessions from people who saw something they shouldn't have. Heard footsteps in empty houses. Woke up with bruises they can't explain. Still here? Each story gets darker. The woman who found handprints on her ceiling. The guy whose reflection moved first. The kid who drew the man in his closet before anyone mentioned the murder. Which one will mess you up the most? Subscribe before something finds you first. New confessions every week. Don't watch alone. Let's dive into some unsettling late-night confessions. I stood by and watched my wife nearly take our son's life, and I felt relieved when she tried. Sounds horrible, I know. Fair warning, this one is pretty long, but it's something I've carried for years. On my therapist's advice, I wrote everything down to process my feelings. He never told me to post it online, of course, but I need outside perspectives. Even after all this time, I don't fully understand how I feel. I know I made mistakes, probably a lot, but I also tried to do what I thought was best. My son was deeply troubled, and living with him was like walking through hell every single day. If you've ever watched the film We Need to Talk About Kevin, you'll understand what I mean. When I saw it, it felt like someone had hidden cameras in my home. The only real difference was that in the movie, the boy acted normal around his dad and only revealed his dark side to his mom. But with my son, there was no mask. His disturbing behavior was out there for everyone to see from the moment he was born. He wasn't an accident. My wife and I planned for him, prayed for him, and were overjoyed when he finally arrived. He was loved, wanted, and we gave him everything we could to ensure a happy childhood. But from the very first day, he seemed miserable. He cried endlessly, for 13 straight months. No exaggeration. He screamed until his tiny voice was gone, his face red and twisted in silence, still sobbing even in his sleep. We tried everything: doctors, specialists, diet changes, rocking, swaddling, toys, music, you name it. Nothing worked. For more than a year, our lives were consumed by constant crying, sleepless nights, and exhaustion. When that stage finally ended, we thought maybe things would get better. But instead, it became clear he was simply furious at existing. I never once saw a genuine smile of joy on his face. Not once. What I did see often was a cruel, twisted grin whenever he managed to hurt someone, break something, or cause chaos. His happiness came only from destruction and cruelty. The moment he could walk, he made it his mission to destroy. Anything within reach, he'd smash, chew, throw in the toilet, whatever he could do to ruin it. Soon he learned how to remove his diaper, and from then on he delighted in smearing filth wherever possible. Later he got sneakier, hiding it, grinding it into carpets, making the house stink beyond repair. By the time he was older, between 9 and 15, it had only escalated. He used to urinate and defecate in our bed until we finally had to install a lock on our bedroom door to keep him out. After that, he would simply leave his mess in the hallway, right in front of our room. This destructive behavior started when he was about 2.5 years old, and sadly, he never grew out of it. I'll try to keep this short, because honestly, I could share endless examples. As he grew older, his behavior only escalated. He became impossible to handle, biting, kicking, screaming, scratching, and even spitting at anyone who tried to help him. By the time he was 9, he had already been expelled from school twice. Eventually, they allowed him back, only to expel him permanently. The next school placed him in a separate class, isolating him from the other children. At home, things weren't any easier. We had to secure the kitchen with a locked door because he would steal knives, sometimes stabbing the furniture and walls, other times chasing people around with them. When he was 10, he stabbed me in the hip and backside badly enough to leave permanent scars. As the years went on, his behavior grew darker. He started setting fires and torturing local animals. There was a stray dog near the park, and he blinded it in one eye with a barbecue fork. He even dipped cats' tails in petrol and lit them on fire. At that point, he wasn't just troubled. He was violent, unpredictable, and terrifying to live with. And before people rushed to ask, yes, we tried everything. He was in therapy. He saw a psychiatrist twice a week. Over the years, he was prescribed countless different medications. Nothing helped. Therapy didn't help. Medication didn't help. It was as though he carried around a storm of rage and hatred that poisoned everything around him. When he was 16, my wife became pregnant again. Instead of joy, we felt dread. The pregnancy wasn't planned, and after 16 years of pure chaos with our son, the thought of starting over was unbearable. We even considered ending the pregnancy, But in those days it wasn't as accessible, and my wife was firmly against it. After long discussions, we agreed she would carry the baby, and if the child turned out anything like our son, we would give it up for adoption. But when our daughter was born, everything changed. She was normal, happy, calm, and affectionate. She breastfed without biting, laughed easily, and by 4 months, she was already sleeping through the night. For the first time, we saw what our lives could have been if our son had been different. Every moment with her felt magical, and I don't have the words to fully describe the relief we felt. Looking back, I think this was when I started to distance myself from my son. Up until then, despite all my mistakes, I had always tried to help him, to love him, and to give him the best care I could. But once my daughter arrived, my wife and I naturally shifted our focus to her. Not because of malice, but because she was so easy to love, so joyful. Compared to her, our son seemed like a constant storm. I know it was wrong, but I can't explain it any other way. And to be honest, he didn't even seem to care that my wife was pregnant in the first place. I honestly can't say if he ever fully grasped what was happening. But once we brought our baby girl home, his behavior went from bad to worse. I didn't think he could escalate further, but at 17, he pushed things to an entirely new level. Our days were filled with explosive shouting matches. After each fight, he'd storm out, vanish for hours, and sometimes not come back until the next morning. Strangely enough, I began to almost welcome those clashes, because at least they gave us a break from him. After our daughter's birth, whatever relationship I had left with my son had practically disintegrated. The only conversations we shared were through raised voices. My wife's connection with him was even more fractured. She had completely run out of patience. The moment he entered a room, she would immediately shout at him to get out, cursing until he finally left. He began spending more and more time away from home, which honestly felt like a blessing. I had no idea what he was doing out there, but at least we weren't the ones enduring his chaos. As a precaution, we had turned our home into something of a fortress. Every flimsy interior door had been replaced with solid, heavy wood fitted with keyed locks that only my wife and I carried. It might sound extreme, but those doors gave us a way to create safe zones. And to be clear, we weren't locking him inside like some prisoner. He had full freedom to move about and leave the house whenever he wanted. The truth is, we were the ones locking ourselves in to stay safe. In many ways, we were prisoners in our own home. On the day that changed everything, my son and I had a heated fight that morning, after which he stormed out. My wife and I finally enjoyed a rare moment of quiet in the kitchen while our daughter napped. Suddenly, she began to cry. Any parent of a newborn knows the different kinds of cries: hunger, discomfort, or the need to be held. But this wasn't one of those. This cry was pure fear. Immediately, both of us jumped up and ran to the bedroom. The door was locked, of course, and fumbling with the key wasted precious seconds. When we finally got inside, the sight froze us. Our son had climbed in through the window and was standing over her crib, clutching a hunting knife. I had no idea where he got it. It wasn't ours. We kept every blade locked away, monitored with care. My best guess is that he must have stolen it from someone nearby. He had already cut her twice, once across her stomach and once on her arm. Blood was running freely when I entered the room. He was dragging the blunt edge of the knife along her cheek, not slicing, but taunting her with it as she screamed. Then he looked up, grinned at us, and in that instant I found myself moving, rushing forward instinctively to shield her. I didn't think. I just acted. But even faster than me, my wife lunged. It was like watching a film in fast forward. She reached our son first, struck his hand away so hard the knife flew across the room, then hurled her whole body into him, knocking him clear of the crib and slamming him against the wall. I grabbed my daughter, clutching her tight, while my wife shook violently, screaming uncontrollably. The smell, the chaos, the sound of her wailing, it's burned into me. But what I'll never forget was the look on my son's face, blank, empty, lifeless. His eyes were void of emotion, alien almost. My wife stepped toward him. I could have stopped her, but I didn't. She stepped again, closer. Still, I let her. For a few seconds, she just stared at him. Then she snapped, her fist smashed into his face. Until now, maybe you pictured her as fragile, delicate. She's not. She may be small-framed, but never dainty. Since her teens, she's trained as a fighter. Back then MMA wasn't around, but boxing and karate were, and she was exceptional. At 130 pounds, she was all muscle, with a punch that could drop anyone. I outweighed her by 70 pounds, yet I've always believed she could have taken me down in a real fight. We had never once laid hands on our son in anger, but that day something inside her broke. Years of hurt, sorrow, and pent-up rage erupted in her strikes. His head snapped back, blood streaming from his nose. He looked stunned, almost confused, as though he couldn't comprehend what had just happened. She paused only for a moment, then hit him again. I could have pulled her away, but I didn't. I just stood there, holding my daughter, watching as she unleashed everything. Each time he tried to shield himself, she hammered a different spot, head, body, relentless. For the first time in his life, he screamed, cried out, begged her to stop. It was raw, genuine. But she didn't. Her training took over, faster, harder, precise. When he swung at her, she dodged effortlessly, striking back like he was nothing more than a heavy bag. And I just stood there watching as she broke him down, blow after blow. Then I turned my back on them and took my daughter out of the room. I brought my daughter to the kitchen and gave her a bath in the sink. I found that he had cut her a third time on the sole of her foot. All the cuts were superficial. I cleaned her up and held her until she calmed. I put polyspore in and band-aids on her cuts. In our bedroom, I could hear my son screaming, calling my wife horrible names, telling her. He would cut her head off and eat her corpse. After a while I didn't hear him saying anything anymore, didn't even hear him crying out. I assumed that he must have been knocked out, but I could still hear her beating him. That went on for a long time, long enough for my daughter to drift off to sleep. In my arms. I just sat at the kitchen table waiting for her to finish. Finally she came out and sat down across from me. Her hands were swollen and red. Her face and arms were splattered with blood. Her chest was heaving. We just stared at each other without saying anything. After a while I asked her, "Is he dead?" She looked back at me and answered, "I ___. Hope so." I nodded. That was all there was to say about that. I understood how she felt perfectly. I felt the same. I didn't know what to do, so we just sat there waiting silently. Eventually my wife started crying and went to go take a shower. I just stayed where I was holding our daughter after a long while. I heard her moaning and sobbing coming from her room. It turned out that my son wasn't dead. I went in to see how bad it was, and it was pretty bad. I've never seen a more merciless beating laid out onto anyone before or since. He was lying on the floor, rolling around with blood leaking out of his face, lying in a pool of vomit. His nose was squashed flat out across his face. Both of his eyes were completely swollen shut and starting to blacken already. I could see that a couple of his fingers were bent out at weird angles, and he had pissed his pants. I think he must have been missing teeth, but I couldn't see any on the floor, and I couldn't see an inside of his mouth. His lips were all puffed up and swollen from talking to my wife about it. Later I know now that she had systematically beaten every part of his body, focusing heavily on his legs, she told me. She kicked him in the groin repeatedly until her legs got tired and had kept beating his body long after he had passed out. When my wife came out of our shower, I still didn't know what to do about her son. I didn't know whether to call the police or an ambulance, take him to the hospital myself. I honestly didn't have any idea what to do. After a while I realized that I simply didn't care what happened to him anymore, and we decided to just let him live or die on his own. There was an in-law suite in the basement that we had never really used, and my wife, my daughter, and I just moved down there. We simply ceded the top floor of the house to my son and locked everything down, separated our lives entirely. There was plenty of food in the upstairs cabinets, enough for a couple of weeks or more. He had a washroom and bedrooms to use. We had a washroom in the basement, a small kitchenette and a separate entrance. So we could just stop going upstairs. We just decided we were done with him. I figured we'd let his food run out and see what happened next. Over the next week we could hear moving around upstairs. Sometimes I felt like he spent nearly all his time just lying in bed, trying to recover. I kept working but stayed on high alert, worried he might lash out again in the driveway. Thankfully, he never did. My wife stayed home with our daughter. She never left our sight. One night we heard him completely lose control, smashing things and shouting like a storm tearing through the house. We didn't go near him. Oddly, he never came downstairs or tried to confront us. Deep down, I think he feared that if he pushed us again, my wife might actually finish him off. After 3 tense weeks of silence from the basement, I finally dared to step upstairs. The sight gutted me. The main floor was wrecked beyond recognition. My son was gone, vanished. It took us months to fix the damage he left behind. The walls were smeared with food and filth, broken glass littered the ground, and deep holes scarred the drywall. He'd ripped apart the flooring in the kitchen corner and even discharged an entire fire extinguisher across the living room. I felt strangely grateful he hadn't set the house on fire with us inside. He wasn't afraid of flames, and that terrified me more than anything. Every day afterward, I lived in constant fear, haunted by the thought that he might suddenly reappear, ambush us, or try to kill us. It wasn't until 3 years later, when we moved to a new house where he couldn't find us, that I finally started to breathe again. My son was born in 1972, my daughter in 1989. I'm nearly 70 now. My wife passed away from cancer in 2016, and today my daughter is 31 with 2 little girls of her own who bring me joy I thought I'd never feel again. I live with her and her husband now. Twice a month I see a therapist, because the past never really leaves you. The truth is, I don't know where my son is. The last time I saw him, he was bleeding on a bedroom floor. That was over 30 years ago. I've never heard from him since, and honestly, I don't want to. My heart is full of guilt and conflict. I didn't strike him myself, but I allowed it to happen. Worse, I felt relief when he was beaten. A part of me thought he deserved it, even wished him dead. If he managed to heal and build a normal life, I hope he found peace. But if he stayed the same violent, destructive person, then maybe it was better if someone stopped him permanently. He was like a rabid dog, and I just pray he isn't out there hurting anyone else. Now, my own time is short. A couple weeks ago, doctors told me I have cancer, spreading to my liver and lungs. They say chemo and surgery might buy me months, maybe a year, but at a heavy cost. I've chosen not to fight it. My wife doesn't know. I can't stand to see her pressure me into painful treatments with such slim odds. Instead, I'm choosing quality over quantity. I start work later, finish earlier, make her breakfast, take her out at night, and focus on making our last months happy. My landlord even let me run my workshop rent-free for 6 months, lifting a huge financial burden. I only hope she'll forgive me when I'm gone. This isn't the first time I've carried a secret like this. When I was 16, we had a family pet, a sweet albino chinchilla named Dusty. One day, I noticed his eye tearing. Feeling proud of my new driver's license, I took him to the vet on my own. She examined him, did an X-ray, and gently explained he had a deformity. His teeth roots were pressing into his brain. It would eventually kill him early. I cried the whole drive home, but I decided not to tell my family. The vet said he wasn't in pain, and I didn't want his last year clouded by sadness. I wanted them to keep loving him like nothing was wrong. Dusty lived out his days running tunnels through our bed sheets and hopping into our hands with pure joy. He never knew he was sick. Sometimes, I think about that choice, and about all the other choices I made. Life is full of secrets, guilt, and regrets. But also, little moments of love, joy, and peace that make it worth remembering. Later that day, I stopped by Petco and picked up some rodent eye drops as a cover. That evening, I proudly told my family I had taken Dusty to the vet, claiming the doctor diagnosed mild irritation, apparently common in chinchillas, and prescribed drops. In truth, it was a lie. Dusty went on to live 3 more years, 2 years longer than the vet had predicted. He passed away just before turning 10. On the morning he died, I confessed to my dad what had really happened. He told me I had grown up more than I realized, but inside I carried the guilt of lives lost. About 4 years ago, I became a vendor on the dark web. It didn't last long. Honestly, I was too lazy to hold down a 9-to-5, and I wanted quick cash to start my own business. I had already been using drugs for years, and through those circles I met plenty of dealers. Eventually, I started selling myself. The problem was my anxiety. I hated meeting strangers in parking lots and never wanted anyone to know my address. That's when I read about Silk Road and its creator, Ross Ulbricht. I became obsessed with the idea of online markets, studied operational security non-stop, and finally launched my own store. At first, things went well. I sold ketamine, meth, and cheap outdoor weed my friends sourced. Business was steady, even after losing a couple $1,000s in an exit scam. By then, I had saved around $255,000, so it didn't destroy me like it did other vendors. Later, I met a reliable supplier who visited town once a week. He could get anything: LSD, mushrooms, PCP, mescaline, and even fentanyl. Back then, fentanyl wasn't as widespread in heroin as it is today. Most users still bought pure fentanyl separately. I tracked every order in an Excel sheet: names, zip codes, and products. But one fatal mistake ruined everything. Both mescaline and fentanyl were fine white powders, nearly identical in appearance. Somehow, whether from a spreadsheet glitch or my own error while high, about 7 customers who ordered mescaline ended up receiving fentanyl instead. Days later, someone messaged me. His friend had died after using what they thought was mescaline. My stomach dropped. I checked my logs and realized I had more mescaline left than I should have. That meant multiple orders had been wrong. I panicked. Some buyers hadn't finalized their orders, and several hadn't logged in for days. I knew exactly what had happened. Without waiting for more news, I shut down my vendor account immediately. I sold off my remaining stock, converted Bitcoin to cash, and disappeared into a new city. I got a job in a restaurant and cut off everyone from my past. I haven't touched drugs since. But the guilt never left me. I still think about those people every night. Out of curiosity, and maybe shame, I searched their names online. I confirmed at least 4 deaths, including 2 friends who shared a batch. That weight has never lifted. Now, I live sober, go to work, play video games, and keep to myself. People I once knew have distanced themselves, probably because I'm no longer who I used to be. Could I even tell a therapist? Would anyone understand? Most days, I feel like I don't deserve to be alive. On top of that, my personal life shattered when I discovered my mom, who I once idolized, was cheating on my dad. Growing up, she was everything: kind, protective, successful, and someone I wanted to emulate. But as an adult, I began to see her true side. Manipulative, selfish, two-faced. It broke me to realize the person I admired most was a stranger behind closed doors. For 25 years, I thought she was perfect. Now, I see her as someone I can barely stand to look at. Life changes you in ways you never expect. Sometimes the people you love the most aren't who you thought they were. Sometimes the mistakes you make never stop haunting you. And sometimes, you just need to tell your story, hoping it makes the weight a little lighter. And that's it for today's disturbing Reddit confessions. I actually had a lot of fun putting this video together. It's a little different from my usual content, but it has the same vibe. Let me know in the comments below. Do you want to see more stories like this? Do you want me to share my opinions on them? Or maybe tweak the style a little? Your feedback means everything. Thank you for sticking around until the very end. It really does mean a lot. This was Midnight Confessions, and I'll catch you next time.